Hi everyone, welcome to Synergy Flavors Trendcast. My name is Alex Masumoto. I'm a marketing associate at Synergy Flavors in the US. And on this episode, we're going to explore one of our inspiring trends of 2020 that is called Wanderlust. And to help me with that and to tell you what the creative process was, what this trend was about and how Synergy is incorporating this trend to support our customers, I'm joined by Casey Cooter, our marketing communication specialist, also at our US location. Hey Casey, thanks for joining.
Hey Alex, excited to be here and to discuss with everyone our 2020 inspiring trends, the first of all being Wanderlust. But before we jump in, how about we talk a little bit about our creative process and how we got to these trends for 2020?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to start, Casey. We have been mapping out trends constantly, right? But at the same time, we're so overwhelmed with information. So we understood there was an opportunity and a need for us to develop a project to identify the major trends of the year, and then we will be able to say, hey, these are the trends that we need to focus on for 2020. These are the trends that are definitely impacting consumer lives every day. But I guess the question going back a little bit is how we identified and selected the Wanderlust trend among so many trends out there, right? And I think as we said, the creative approach that we took really plays a big role in there. I would love to hear your perspective too, Casey, because we were sitting in that room, literally throwing thoughts at the wall. Um, but the biggest takeaway that I take from it is that process allow us to identify key points that we needed to identify for the year of 2020. And what I mean by that is that as I said, we're so overwhelmed with information, and we were overwhelmed in that room, throwing thoughts at the wall in many different ways. But that creative process allowed us to identify those key points and then combine the thoughts into developing these trends. So that's how we a little bit of the process from the beginning started. But Casey, would you like to give your perspective on that? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I think you made a really good point by saying, we're overwhelmed with information. I think that goes across the board just with the availability of the internet and technology at our fingertips. But, once we did the research and, we found consistencies across categories, even outside of food and beverage, we were able to take that offline, turn on some music, throw our ideas at the wall, and really come up with how can these trends relate back into food and beverage. So once we mapped out those ideas, we were able to identify these three topics are obviously mega trends for 2020, but we were able to take it a step further and dig into what else is going to be happening in the upcoming year that will really help bring those trends to life, whether it's a big sporting event like the Olympics or an international holiday such as Earth Day. We were able to really map out, these key drivers and influencers in consumer purchasing habits to what's going to be happening in their everyday life. And then took it a step further and figured how could we manifest these trends into taste form. And with that, we worked collaboratively with our R&D team to create a series of flavors that highlight each of these trends that we're talking about, the first today being Wanderlust, but others to come in future episodes.
Thanks, Casey. I think that's, it really sets the tone to the presentation now that we have gone through the inspiring process and now jumping right into the Wanderlust trend. So what's the Wanderlust trend and how Synergy Flavors sees that trend in the food and beverage industry and from a consumer standpoint as well? A data that stood out with us was the number of international travelers from the US in 2018. 93 million Americans traveled internationally in that year, and that represented a growth of 6% from 2017. And based on that huge number, we decided to do a deep dive to understand, what's the consumer motive behind it, and what are the consequences of those, this huge spike on traveling lately. So we took a look at, four generations basically: baby boomers, Generation X, millennials and Generation Z. But starting with baby boomers. So baby boomers, they have the desired time and resources to travel, right? But as you can see, baby boomers that traveled to relax jumped from 38% to 49% in 2018 in the US. So that's the biggest motive when baby boomers are traveling is relaxation. When I'm thinking to Generation X, the Generation X, they usually have young kids. They're starting a family, so family life shapes Gen X preferences. So the timing of their trips closely align with school calendars. But now, if we take a look at millennials, and I'd like to highlight two words here, and it's adventure and experience. Millennials are looking for those two things. So millennials are twice as likely than other generations to seek adventure, and 72% of millennials would like to increase their spending on experiences over physical things, and especially on vacation. 86% of millennials want to experience a new culture, if compared to 44% that prefer to party and 28% prefer to shop. Again, giving emphasis into these two words, adventure and experience, right? When on vacation, millennials want to be anything but a tourist. Instead, this generation is even more likely than most to seek to immerse themselves in the destination. And that's, the biggest point that I want to make here. They want to become almost a part of the location they find themselves in. They want to live like locals. They want to drink like, what the locals drink. They want to eat what the locals eat. They want to have the full experience of what's like to live in that place. Baby boomers and Gen X, at the other hand, they travel for relaxation and will likely frequent the same destination multiple times. And that doesn't happen with millennials and Gen Z. That's not the common behavior that we're seeing in the market. By having this full experience when traveling, we see a big difference in the behavior lately when millennials want, they go back home. They want to share with their friends and family everything that they experience abroad that probably those loved people didn't have the chance to go with them. That's one of the main reasons why we have this huge number of international cuisines and restaurants in the US lately if you compare it to 2 years ago. But the other thing that I like to highlight is that we're also seeing the food and beverage industry looking into these international cuisines and translating those flavors, textures, desserts, everything that would represent well that culture into food and beverage products in the supermarket, and to be available in the shelves. A culture that influenced us a lot into choosing the Wanderlust as one of the main trends in 2020 was definitely Japan. Japan is the world's fastest growing travel destination, and that's a data from 2019. And also, we all know that Japanese food is one of the most influencing cuisines, both at home and away from home occasions. But what was key in the year of 2020 was definitely the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Unfortunately, with this whole situation with the COVID-19, the Olympic Games was postponed into 2020. But that was probably the biggest sports event of the year, and really influenced us into looking into the Japanese culture, the Japanese cuisine. What are the flavors that were trending in that environment, and how we can translate that into a real flavor? That we'll touch a little bit later on.
And on that point with COVID, I'm sure a few of you guys, while we've been presenting, I'm sure COVID's been on the back of your mind. Russell Research a few months ago published this data from a survey that was administered at the end of March. But really, what this highlights is even though people have been ordered to shelter in place and social distance, if you look at the data, it really shows that people are yearning for that type of experience and, a social outing and being able to travel. 57% of Americans miss visiting family and friends and cannot wait to resume normal social activities with them once the situation improves. Likewise, they're also yearning to dine out at a restaurant. So as we saw, pre-COVID, Japanese cuisine was trending. We can only anticipate that this is gonna continue to grow once the sheltering in places are lifted across countries, but especially within the U.S. And last but not least, that really speaks to this idea of wanderlust and the desire for exploration is the ability to travel. 52% of Americans, so more than half, really miss that accessibility to travel, whether it's a weekend trip, a long vacation, or even a day trip. They're really looking to have that sense of experience once again with their loved ones. So in terms of wanderlust and relating it back to food and beverage, a few of the things that we have highlighted here is, different topics that we're seeing and how they relate back to wanderlust in terms of food and beverage. So here are some key topics that we're going to briefly review with you, especially related back to flavor and the food, beverage, and nutrition industries.
Okay, yeah, the first topic you wanted to cover on flavor exploration is new flavor varieties. And Mintel has a very interesting research and around the topic. It basically covered 3 points. It's experimentation, education, and experience. 50% of US consumers are motivated to eat international cuisine by wanting to try something new. And we go to education, whether 71% of UK adults who consume world cuisine would like to become more knowledgeable about different world cuisines. And again, experience is a common word in the wanderlust trend, and 78% of Canadian adults believe internationally inspired foods are a good way to experience other cultures. So definitely, and we take a look at categories like coffee. Coffee needs to embrace a more exotic world of flavor, and we know that coffee has been playing around ethnic, styles and cuisines for a while, especially with Italian cuisine. Coffee flavors from Italy are pretty famous around the world. But there is definitely opportunities for the coffee industry and everything that's related to coffee and coffee flavors to play around more exotic and embrace new cultures, new cuisine into that segment.
In terms of seasonality, we see brands consistently innovating based on the holidays, whether it's new fall flavors or kind of capturing the sense of Christmas or other winter holidays. But what we're also seeing now is brands are starting to move beyond their respective holidays and branching out into embracing, the season in general. Some brands are doing this by reaching for seasonal fruits based on the location that they're launching different products in, or incorporating different types of botanical profiles into their product to give it that sense of, fresh spring or warm summer flavors or, spice with the fall, and really expanding beyond those traditional means of seasonality and trying to expand the consumer outlook on, what a season could bring outside of the holidays. And with that, especially with botanicals, we're seeing this draw towards eating the rainbow. So this typically was coined with food and beverage products being Instagram worthy, as seen by Starbucks leading the way with different and kind of out there but colorful beverages that their consumers can take a picture of and share on social media. But it's going beyond that as well, and incorporating different botanicals, not just for flavor, but for functionality and color as well.
Yeah, Casey, and if you look into new ingredients as well, and I want to highlight here the plant-based word, new ingredients are keeping consumers engaged and in the plant-based space. And we see brands innovating with new and trending hero ingredients to offer memorable flavor experiences to consumers in that specific segment.
And you see that being transferred too in terms of textures and sensations. So as new ingredients are thrown into the mix and, we're introducing it to consumers for the first time, above all, taste is king. So when you're trying to incorporate new textures and different sensations into different products, there are different standards that consumers will be comparing it to. So whether you're using a plant-based protein, like you just mentioned, Alex, and trying to, maybe maintain a little bit of the vegetative notes or even the grittiness that some of those proteins naturally have, you really have to be strategic about how you are using these new ingredients to create these new textures and sensations. But even aside from just texture, when it comes to food and beverage, it's incorporating all of the senses. Eating the rainbow, as mentioned earlier, is really about incorporating visuals and presentation into your product, whether it's on menu or it's off of a retail shelf. We've seen different innovation using fizz or something similar to Pop Rocks, where it has like this very sensorial oral sensation, to even bars serving cocktails that are smoking when it comes to the table, just for that added level of experience in general when you're at the different establishment. And with that as well, different categories continue to borrow flavor profiles and textures from other segments, whether it's confection borrowing from a cocktail or even ice cream borrowing from cocktails. We're seeing this emergence across categories where consumers are open to trying something outside of what may be normal for that original segment, but is perhaps something that they've tried elsewhere. And with that as well, of course, always circling back to cultural inclusion, is this sense of diversity. So not only are people traveling more and they are making a point to live like a local and really immersing themselves in these different destinations, when they return home from their travels, they often are seeking those types of flavors and experiences or feelings that they had when they were on vacation, and finding ways to bring it back home, whether it's cooking in their own kitchen or going to a restaurant and trying something that, perhaps they wouldn't have before because they're very heavily influenced by their travel experiences. We're seeing this increase in diversity, especially in terms of more exotic flavors entering the market across food, beverage, and nutrition. But another topic, too, to consider is being inclusive in terms of demographics. So it's really speaking to the idea of making sure that your products offer something for all genders, male, female, all cultures, but also all age groups. So often in a lot of this presentation, even focused on millennials and Gen Z, just given their coming of age and increase in purchasing power. But that's not to say that we should exclude those flavor preferences and those travel habits of baby boomers and Gen Xers, because they are still a strong presence in the market. So it's really making sure that you have something for everyone in a more customized sense. So giving people option is something that really speaks to the modern consumer.
Thanks, Casey. I think that's a nice way to showcase how we're seeing the Wanderlust trend being applied in our industry. And I just wanted to do a quick recap right now of everything that we talked about. So we did talk about the inspiring process and the creative approach that we took into working in this project. And second, we talked about the Wanderlust trend itself. And now I'd like to touch on the inspiring flavor. So ultimately, Synergy Flavors has been looking into these trends to be able to develop the best flavors that resonate well with what's happening in the market, what's on trend in the market. Heavily influenced by the Japanese culture and ultimately by the Wanderlust trend, we developed a flavor that's called Red Cherry Blossom. Cherry blossom is the most iconic flower of Japan, and we took the cherry blossom and we added a hint of red apple into that to create the red cherry blossom flavor. You can find more information about the Wanderlust trend and the flavors developed around the 2020 inspiring trends, like the red cherry blossom, at our website synergytaste.com or across our social media pages. Also, if you haven't had a chance to listen to our episode where we talk about COVID-19 and the impact that the pandemic might have in the food and beverage industry, please check it out and let us know your thoughts or any questions you may have. And also keep an eye for an upcoming Trendcast focusing on our next 2020 trend that's called vintage. Casey, I appreciate you joining. I'd like to thank you for tuning in to listen to Synergy Flavor Trendcast, and see you next time.